Buddhism, a religion without religion. Have you ever wondered why a man who lived 2,500 years ago, wrote nothing down, and founded no religion, could profoundly impact billions of people worldwide? What is it about his teachings that we are still discussing today? Part 1. The non-religious nature. Buddhism is often called a religion, but in reality it goes against almost every conventional definition of religion. It has no blind faith, rigid dogma, sacred scriptures, or concept of a god to be worshipped. Buddhism does not believe in an immortal soul or a heaven after death. So, what is it? Buddhism focuses on personal experience and self-awareness. The Buddha never claimed to be a savior or a messenger of God. He was simply an awakened person who showed us how to awaken ourselves. This means you do not have to believe in anything without solid evidence. You are encouraged to explore, question, and find the truth. But if there is no God, no soul, no heaven, then what happens after death? The Buddha's answer may surprise you. Part 2. Critique of God. If you grew up in a monotheistic culture, the idea of a world without God can feel unsettling. You might ask yourself, if there is no God, then what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? However, the Buddha would say that the question itself is the problem. While other religions often rely on faith in a supreme being to explain the world and provide meaning to life, Buddhism approaches this issue differently. The Buddha argued that belief in God is just a human psychological construct, born out of vulnerability and the need to find meaning. God is like a crutch to provide comfort in an uncertain world rather than an objective reality. That is why there are so many different gods in the world, each one tailored to the needs and desires of a particular group of people. Consider the Eightfold Path, the path to enlightenment in Buddhism. None of the steps requires believing in God. Instead, the Eightfold Path focuses on developing wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation qualities that can be cultivated without any supernatural intervention. Indeed, in many Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha often refuses to answer questions about God's existence or the universe's origin. In the sea, Lukya Sutta, Majjhima Nik, Ya 63, a monk named Lukyaputta asked the Buddha about such metaphysical issues. The Buddha replied with an analogy of a person who has been struck by a poisoned arrow and refuses to be treated until they know every detail about the person who shot the arrow, the type of arrow, the materials used to make the bow, and so on. The Buddha concluded that focusing on questions irrelevant to liberation from suffering is futile and only increases suffering. In other words, the concept of God is a projection of human frailty. We create an all-powerful deity to protect us from our fears, answer the most difficult questions, and promise us a reward after death. However, the Buddha argued that this is not the path to enlightenment. In the Tavijja Sutta, Ga Nik, Ya 13, the Buddha discusses the views of those who believe in God. He points out that there is no direct evidence of God's existence and that prayers or rituals do not guarantee a connection with that supreme being. The Buddha questions the logic of seeking salvation through a deity that no one can prove is real. So, what happens when we face difficulties in life? The Buddha has a very different answer than what you might expect. Part 3. Craving and suffering. The Buddha believed that insatiable desires are the root of all human suffering, dukkha. We always want more than what we have. More money, more power, more love, more happiness. The problem is not wanting a better life, but believing that external things can bring us lasting happiness. In the Sa Yuta Nik Ya, the Buddha explains the Four Noble Truths, in which the second noble truth identifies craving, thirst, as the origin of suffering. He taught that there are three main types of craving: craving for sense pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. All of these stem from a fundamental misunderstanding of the impermanent self and the belief that happiness can be found outside oneself. The Buddha taught that these desires can never be satisfied by their very nature. Even if we achieve everything we want, we will quickly become bored and want something else. This vicious cycle continues endlessly from one lifetime to the next, in a real world or an imagined afterlife. Consider the parable of the charioteer in the Dhammapada. If craving binds a person, their mind wanders like a vine in the forest. They go from birth to birth, like a monkey seeking fruit in the jungle. This story illustrates how craving leads to continuous bondage and suffering. According to the Buddha, true fulfillment comes from overcoming these desires through awareness. When we clearly understand the impermanent nature of all things, we no longer cling to them. We learn to accept reality as it is and find peace within ourselves. But if life is suffering and desire is the cause, is there a way out? The Buddha presented an obvious path, but it may not be like anything you have heard. Part 4. Abandoning Metaphysics. While other philosophers and theologians try to find answers to life's big questions, such as, where did the world come from? Or, what is the ultimate meaning of existence? The Buddha chose a different path. He abandoned all metaphysical speculation, arguing that it only leads to endless conjecture and does nothing to help us escape suffering. In the Agivakagota Sutta, Majjhima Nik, Ya 72, a man named Vakagota asked the Buddha about metaphysical issues such as whether the universe is finite or infinite, whether the soul and body are the same or different, and whether the Tathagata exists after death. The Buddha refused to answer these questions, saying they were irrelevant to the ultimate goal of liberation from suffering. The Buddha was not interested in finding the ultimate answer or some transcendent meaning. Instead, he focused on living fully in the present moment with all it entails. He encouraged us to look directly at reality without evasion and without clinging to any beliefs or doctrines. Consider the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination, pa ikazamap da. Instead of seeking a first cause or a creator, dependent origination explains the formation of all phenomena through a series of cause and effect relationships. It emphasizes the interdependence and interconnectedness of all things, showing that nothing exists independently or permanently. This does not mean that Buddhism denies the existence of other dimensions or supernatural abilities. However, it is argued that focusing on those things will only distract us from the main goal, to liberate ourselves from suffering and achieve enlightenment. So, who are we? Do we have an unchanging self, an eternal soul? The Buddha's answer may shake the foundation of what you believe to be true. Part 5. No self, no soul. One of the Buddha's most challenging teachings is anatta, the absence of a self. He rejected the notion of a separate, immortal soul residing within us, and asserted that we are part of an endless web of existence, like a vast ocean of consciousness. In the Anattalaka, a sutta, Sa Yuta Nik, Ya 22.59, the Buddha explained to 5 monks that form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, the five aggregates that make up a human being, are not the self. He asked them whether these are permanent or impermanent, and whether they bring happiness or suffering, and they replied that they are all impermanent and suffering. The Buddha concluded that it is impossible to consider things impermanent and suffering as I or mine. We call I a collection of ever-changing physical and mental processes. We are constantly changing from moment to moment, and no fixed essence resides within us. Consider the example of a river. We may think that the river is a continuous entity, but in reality, the water is constantly flowing and changing. Similarly, a person is not a fixed entity, but a flow of processes and phenomena. The self is just an illusion, born from the sense of separation we create. We identify ourselves with our bodies, thoughts, and emotions, and believe that this is I. However, the Buddha said this is just attachment, the root of all suffering. When we let go of this I, we liberate ourselves. In the Milindapanya, King Milinda asked the monk N. Gasina about the problem of the self. N. Gasina answered with the example of a chariot. The chariot is not the axle, wheels, frame, etc., but all these parts combined constitute the chariot. Similarly, a person is not form, feeling, perception, mental formations, or consciousness. However, the combination of these five aggregates constitutes I. N. Gasana emphasized that I is a linguistic convention, not an actual entity. If there is no self or soul, what continues after death? Is there reincarnation? Moreover, if so, what is it that gets reincarnated? Part 6. Reincarnation and Karma. If there is no immortal soul, what happens after death? Buddhism answers this question with the concept of reincarnation, a continuous process of rebirth without a known beginning or end. However, it is important to emphasize that no self transmigrates from one life to another. Instead, the energy of our actions, words, and thoughts, known as karma, creates the conditions for the next rebirth. Imagine karma as a seed. Whether good or bad, every action we take plants a seed in our consciousness. When the conditions are right, this seed sprouts and produces a corresponding result. This process continues endlessly, forming the cause and effect chain governing our existence. In the Mahakamma Vibhanga Sutta, Majjhima Nik, Ya 136, the Buddha explains the principle of karma and its consequences in detail. He taught that intentional actions, kamma, create corresponding results, vipka. Virtuous actions lead to pleasant results, while non-virtuous actions lead to suffering. However, it is important to note that karma is not fatalism. We can change our karma through mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion. So, what is it that gets reincarnated? The Milindapanya uses the example of a flame to explain this. When one flame is lit from another, no flame moves from one to the other. However, the heat and energy of the original flame create the new flame. Similarly, in rebirth, no self moves from one life to another. However, the energy of karma creates a new existence. Reincarnation is not a concept unique to Buddhism, but Buddhism's explanation differs from that of other religions. While other religions often believe in an immortal soul that is reborn, Buddhism emphasizes the concept of no self and views reincarnation as a continuous transformation of energy. Part 7. The Practical Path. Buddhism is not a system of beliefs, but a practical path to living. The teachings of the Buddha are not commandments to be followed unthinkingly, but guiding principles for you to explore and experience for yourself. That is why the Buddha always encouraged his disciples to come and see, ehipassiko, rather than simply believe what he said. He wanted them to verify, experience, and walk the path to enlightenment for themselves. Buddhism is more like psychology than a religion. It provides the tools to face life's difficulties, understand the nature of your mind, and find peace in a turbulent world. It does not promise a heaven after death, but it offers a way to live a meaningful life here and now. In this video, we explored Buddhism's unique aspect, its non-religious nature. We have seen that Buddhism is not a belief system based on blind faith or the worship of God. Instead, it is a practical path to self-discovery and enlightenment, focusing on personal experience and self-awareness. We discussed Buddhism's critique of the concept of God, arguing that it is a human psychological construct. We also explored the Buddha's teachings on suffering and its cause, desire, and the path to liberation from suffering through the Eightfold Path. Furthermore, we examined Buddhist views on no-self and reincarnation, which may challenge our deepest assumptions about the nature of existence. Finally, we emphasized Buddhism's practical nature, viewing it more as a psychology than a religion.